There are few stranger things in the chess game you're about to see, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. Welcome to week number 5 of our Raburn Series Premiere League Game of the Week. Make sure you join our Discord, link is in the description, because each week the game I cover is suggested by one of our people in our Discord, so make sure you join that to join the discussion there. This week we have a board 2 matchup between Tellumo of the KAN Knights versus Stranger Things of the Super Monkey Gladiators. Tellumo opens with d4, and Stranger Things goes for a King's Indian defense. White chooses the Averbach setup, which is defined by these two early bishop moves. Stranger Things counters in the center with c5. White pushes past with d5, staking out some more space. Bishop is kicked back, and White's kind of hoping with this little bishop back and forth maneuver that maybe h6 would be a bit of a weakness, although it's not going to be too hard for Black to defend. Black plays a6, looking for a b5 break potentially in the future. White goes queen d2, again attacking that h6 pawn, but Black can defend it easily enough with king h7. Now Tellumo decides to just stop over on the queen side, stop Black from breaking with b5 by playing a4. Now with all of White's pieces, pawn, knight, bishop, everything over there, it's going to be really hard for Black to achieve that break. So Black changes gear and switches over to breaking in the center with e6. And after knight f3, swaps in the center, now rook e8, moving to the newly opened file. h3, you're just stopping any of Black's pieces from using this g4 square. So instead, Black goes bishop f5, bringing the bishop out there. Then we get these bishops traded off. White finally gets castled, and Black completes development themselves. Rook c1, and I really like what Stranger Things did next, because this is the kind of position where if you're not careful, you can have a bit of trouble finding a plan. There are a few good options for Black, but let's see what would you do here. One move could be something just like knight e4, trying to get these knights traded off. Because Black has less space, it does make sense for them to trade. Another move could be even just something like developing this rook, because right now it's not doing anything in the corner, so looking for a better spot for that rook, although it's still going to be tough to get that guy open. However, Stranger Things goes for g5, playing on the king side, planning to give him some space over there. White decides to just get these queens off the board, and Stranger Things follows up this g5 with another nice move to continue this kingside play. Can you find what Stranger Things played? Stranger Things just hops back with the knight, opening up the path for that f5 pawn. And if you saw last week's video, we saw some very much unfounded sacrifices. And here we're going to see another very interesting sacrifice that maybe objectively is not the best, but it was able to work out for the white pieces with bishop takes g5. After this trade, White now has 2 pawns for the piece, so Black is up material. Black's next move, though, is really important, because if you play a move like king h8, now you're actually walking into knight takes f7, grabbing that pawn with check, then taking on d6, and now White would have 4 pawns for the piece, so White would be the one who's up material. But instead, Stranger Things plays the good defensive move, king g6, keeping that king around to defend this pawn. After knight e4, attacking d6, the bishop drops back to defend. Right here, White really does not have enough compensation for the sacrificed piece, but White tries to use these pawns to their advantage by pushing with g4. But this is the moment where Stranger Things goes wrong, because the move that they played was f6. And this move is really bad because it invites White's knight into this dominant e6 square. Knight c7 is a threat. You're also looking at ideas of taking this bishop and taking d6, although I don't even know if you want to trade off that knight. And so this is a position that's going to be really tough for Black to defend. So looking back, even if we go back a couple moves actually, probably the cleanest way for Black to convert this would have been not to go passively, because bishop f8, you keep your pawn alive, and that is an important pawn, but it's very passive. Black could have tried striking out with the move f5, and if White takes this pawn, which they were aiming to do, well, that leaves the other knight hanging. Black can take here, and if you take this rook, take back. Black now has 3 pieces for a rook and some pawns, and in general, the pieces are going to very much outperform the rook just because they can work together and coordinate so well. So that was probably the easiest way for Black to convert, but even after playing bishop f8, the main thing was just you can't afford to play f6 and let this knight hop in there, because now this knight is just the strongest piece on the board. Rook c8 was played to avoid that fork, but now White just keeps pushing forward f4, and none of Black's pieces are well placed. They are all just completely cramped. I mean, the bishop hardly has any squares. The knights don't have any squares. The rooks are totally blocked. This is going very wrong for black. They try king f7 just to get the king out of the way of the pawns, but now the rook swings over, and the pawns are pushed g5. And from here on, black plays rook f8, begging white to take it to get rid of that knight. And they say, okay, sure, I'll take it. I'll push, and then I'll take. And from this point onwards, white has the pretty direct plan of promoting these two pawns over here. So g7, then rook e1, putting the rook on an open file, and here goes the other pawn. Eventually, white is able to just start pushing these pawns. Notice there you couldn't take because you dropped this knight. So after knight h7, these knights are blockading the pawns. G6 and taking all of these knights with the king. If you enjoyed that king walk and the way that Tellumo was able to push those pawns through motion, and by the way, let's not sell Stranger Things short, because I do think they played some really sweet moves in that middle game there. So if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe.